He put a gun to my head seconds after I was told the inheritance was finally mine. My name is Olivia, and in that moment, I realized the money wasn't the reward. It was the trigger. Everyone says you learn who people really are when money is involved. I just didn't expect my own family to decide whether I lived or died. The gun wasn't the beginning. It was the end of something that started weeks earlier. Let me take you back to where it all began. The barrel was so close I could smell the oil on the metal. Not gunpowder. Oil. That's what my brain decided to focus on instead of the fact that one twitch of his finger could erase me. People always say time slows down in moments like that. They're wrong. Time fractures. It splinters into tiny, sharp pieces, and every thought cuts you as it passes. I remember thinking, so this is what my share costs. Not money, not blood, just obedience. The gun didn't shake. His hand didn't either. Mine did. And behind him, behind all of it, my grandmother was still sitting in her chair, silent, watching, like she'd been waiting for this moment longer than anyone realized. But I didn't know that yet. Let me take you back to where the mistake really started, because stories like this never begin with a gun. They begin with a promise. The letter arrived on a Thursday, no return address, thick paper, heavy. The kind of envelope that carries bad news even before you open it. Inside was a single page, estate settlement notice. My grandfather was gone. No dramatic phone call, no family gathering. Just ink on paper informing me that a man who raised me half my childhood had quietly passed and left something behind. Something for me. I hadn't spoken to most of my family in years. That wasn't an accident. It was survival. Still, the letter listed my name, my address, my allocated portion, my share. That word echoed louder than it should have, because in my family, shares were never given. They were taken. The drive back to my hometown felt longer than it ever had. Same roads, same cracked billboards, same gas station where my uncle once told me to know my place when I was 17. I didn't stop there. I kept driving. The house came into view just as the sun dipped low, painting the windows gold. It looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just finally seeing it clearly. Cars were already parked out front. Too many. Family had gathered fast. That should have been my first warning. Inside, the air was thick with fake grief. Hugging without warmth. Voices too loud. Laughter arriving too early. My cousin whispered, "Didn't think you'd show." My aunt smiled like a knife. My uncle didn't smile at all. And then I saw him. Marcus, standing near the hallway, arms crossed, watching me like he'd been waiting. Marcus wasn't technically family. He was something worse. Attached. He'd married into us years ago and somehow never left. He had a way of positioning himself at the center of things that didn't belong to him, including money, especially money. His eyes flicked to my coat pocket, then back to my face. A question without words. "You here for it too?" I didn't answer, I just kept walking. The lawyer arrived late. That felt deliberate. He cleared his throat too many times before reading. Percentages, assets, properties, accounts. My name came up. A pause, then the number. It wasn't enormous, but it was enough. Enough to change things, enough to threaten someone, enough to make Marcus exhale sharply through his nose. I didn't look at him, but I felt it. Afterward, people drifted. Conversations broke into whispers. I stepped outside for air, my head buzzing louder than the cicadas. That's when Marcus followed me. "You got lucky," he said casually, lighting a cigarette. Luck. As if this wasn't earned in years of silence and distance. "I got listed," I replied. He smiled. Not with his mouth, with his eyes. "That money's complicated." "So am I said. That was mistake number 2. That night, my grandmother asked me to stay. She didn't say why. She never did. She just looked at me, long and steady, the way she always had when she knew more than she let on. "Things get loud when people think they're owed," she said quietly. I laughed it off. I shouldn't have. Because that was the night Marcus knocked on my door for the first time. Not angry. Not yet. Just curious. By morning, the house felt different. Smaller, tighter, like the walls were listening. The paperwork was finalized by noon. My share was officially mine. Transferred. Clean. That should have been the end. Instead, it was the trigger. That afternoon, Marcus asked me to take a drive. I said no. He smiled again. You might want to reconsider. That was when I noticed his hand, the way it hovered near his jacket, the way his eyes kept flicking toward the road. That's when I realized something else too. No one else was around. And my grandmother, she was watching from the porch, still sitting, still silent, like she was counting down. I wish I could tell you I trusted my instincts immediately, that I walked away, that I saw the danger and chose safety. But fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Marcus leaned against his truck like this was just another casual favor. Afternoon sun glinting off the windshield, engine already running. Just a quick ride, he said. We need to talk numbers. Numbers, that word again. Always pretending this was business, not control. I glanced back at the house. My grandmother hadn't moved, still on the porch, hands folded in her lap, watching us like she was watching a storm roll in. You coming? Marcus asked. I hesitated one beat too long, then I got in. The doors locked automatically. Click, that sound should be illegal. It's too final. We pulled away from the house without another word. Tires crunching gravel. The road stretching out empty ahead of us. No music, no small talk. Just the hum of the engine and my thoughts racing faster than the speedometer. So, Marcus said finally, eyes fixed forward, you know that money isn't really yours. I turned toward him. It's legally mine. He chuckled, not amused, not angry, patient. Legal doesn't mean safe. There it was. The truth slipping through the cracks. We drove past familiar streets and then kept going. Past where anyone would reasonably need to go. Houses thinned, trees thickened. Cell's signal dropped to 1 bar. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere quiet, he said. My stomach sank. Marcus started talking about family, about loyalty, about who had held things together while others ran away. You left, he said, finally looking at me. You walked out and came back just in time to collect a check. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened, he snapped, the calm cracking for the first time. The truck swerved slightly, then corrected. I felt my pulse in my throat. We turned onto a dirt road. The trees closed in like they were leaning closer to listen. This is far enough, I said. Marcus didn't slow down. That's when I noticed the bulge under his jacket. Not subtle, not accidental. My chest tightened. Stop the truck, I said again, louder. He pulled over slowly, too slowly. Gravel popping under the tires, engine still running. He put the truck in park. Then he reached inside his jacket. The gun came out smooth. Familiar, like it belonged there. He didn't point it at me right away. He rested it on his thigh, casual, almost respectful, almost. You're going to sign something, he said. What? My voice barely worked. A transfer. Just makes things easier. For who? For everyone who matters. He finally turned the gun toward me. That's when the air changed. I froze, not screaming, not fighting, just still. The barrel was inches from my face, black, empty-looking, like a tunnel with no end. You don't need all of it, Marcus continued, calm as ever. You don't even need half. I'm not signing anything, I said. His smile vanished. I wasn't asking. I thought of my grandmother then, sitting on the porch, silent, watching. I wondered if she knew this would happen, if she had already decided how it would end. My hands shook as I raised them slowly. This isn't worth it, I said. Money doesn't change anything, he laughed. A sharp, ugly sound. No, he said, money reveals everything. The gun pressed closer. My thoughts scrambled, escape routes, excuses, anything. You kill me, you get nothing, I said quickly. He paused just for a second, enough to let hope slip in. Then he shook his head. That's where you're wrong. My heart dropped. He explained it then, slowly, confidently, like a man reciting instructions he'd practiced, how accidents happen, how paperwork gets lost, how families close ranks, how no one would ever look too closely at someone who already left once. You're a footnote, he said. That's all you've ever been. Something snapped inside me, not bravery, not courage, anger, raw and reckless. I'm not signing, I said again. His jaw tightened. The gun lifted higher. My world narrowed to the dark circle at the end of that barrel. And then a sound, a voice. Marcus! Calm, steady, old, my grandmother's voice. He froze, I froze. Slowly, impossibly, she stepped into view at the edge of the road. Alone. No panic, no fear, no rush. Just walking toward us like this was exactly where she was supposed to be. How did you? Marcus started. She raised a hand. Get out of the truck, she said, not loud, not threatening, certain. Marcus laughed nervously. Ma, you shouldn't be here. She looked straight at the gun. I said, she repeated, get out of the truck. Something in her voice shifted the air again. Marcus hesitated. The gun lowered an inch. That inch felt like oxygen. She turned to me. Are you hurt? I shook my head. Good, she said. Then she looked back at Marcus. Her eyes sharpened. Because if you had pulled that trigger... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Marcus stepped out of the truck slowly, gun still in his hand. My grandmother didn't flinch. She walked closer, close enough to touch him. Put it down, she said. He didn't. Not yet. And that's when she said the words that changed everything. You really think you're in control here? My grandmother said. Her voice didn't shake, not even a little. Marcus scoffed, trying to recover the confidence he just lost. Ma, this doesn't concern you. She tilted her head, studying him the way she used to study broken appliances before fixing them herself. Oh, she said softly, it concerns me more than you realize. The gun was still in his hand, but his grip wasn't as steady anymore. That was my first real clue. She stepped closer to him, close enough that if he raised the gun again, it wouldn't just be me in danger. Put it down, she repeated. Marcus glanced at me, then back at her. You don't know what's going on, she smiled. I know exactly what's going on, she said. You think you're smarter than the family, and you think fear makes people obedient. She leaned in. It doesn't. It makes them sloppy. Marcus swallowed. I saw it. A small, involuntary movement. I'd never seen him unsure before. You should go home, he said, trying to sound firm. This isn't your fight. My grandmother chuckled, a low, dry sound. I buried my husband, she said. I buried friends. I buried secrets this family thought would stay buried forever. She pointed at the gun. And I will bury you if you do something stupid. Silence fell heavy and sharp. Marcus laughed again, but it was hollow now. You're bluffing. She didn't respond. Instead, she reached into her purse. My breath caught. Marcus's eyes widened. His gun snapped up again, pointed at her this time. Don't, he warned. She stopped. Slowly withdrew her hand. Not a weapon, a folded piece of paper. She held it up between two fingers. This, she said, is why you won't pull that trigger. He hesitated. Put the gun down, she said calmly, and I'll explain. Seconds passed, long, painful, then clink. The gun hit the dirt. I almost collapsed from relief. Marcus stared at the paper like it might bite him. What is that? He demanded. She unfolded it carefully. Proof, she said. She turned to me. Do you know why your grandfather left you a share? I shook my head. Because he knew, she said, and because I told him. Marcus stepped back. That's not, she cut him off. You've been skimming for years, small amounts. Accounts that no one checked too closely. Property maintenance funds, rental income. His face drained of color. You think you were clever, she continued. But you forgot one thing. She tapped her temple. I keep copies. The world spun. You knew, I whispered. She looked at me gently. I suspected, enough to watch, enough to wait. Marcus shook his head, backing away. You can't prove any of that. She smiled again. I already did. She turned the paper around so he could see. Bank statements, account numbers, dates, signatures, his signature, and one more thing. A recorded confession transcript. My heart skipped. When? I asked. Last year, she said. You get careless when you think no one is listening. Marcus lunged forward. She didn't move. You take one more step, she said, and I make a phone call. To who? He spat. To the same people your little friend here was about to email, she replied. And a few more. He froze. The power in the moment shifted completely. No gun, no threats, just truth. Marcus's shoulders sagged. You set me up, she nodded. I protected my family. By ruining me, she met his eyes. No, she said. You ruined yourself. I finally found my voice. Why didn't you stop him sooner? She looked at me sadly. Because sometimes, she said, people have to show you exactly who they are. She turned back to Marcus. You will leave, she said. You will not touch a cent of that money. And you will never contact either of us again. And if I don't, he asked weakly. She smiled. Then I press send. He looked at me one last time. Hatred, shame, fear. Then he turned, climbed into his truck and drove away, kicking up a cloud of dust that took his threats with it. The road fell quiet again. I sank onto the seat, shaking. My grandmother picked up the gun, wrapped it in a cloth from her purse, and tucked it away. For the police, she said. I stared at her. Who are you? I asked. She squeezed my hand. Someone who's been waiting, she said. But the story wasn't over. Because when we got back to the house, something else was waiting for us. Something that proved Marcus wasn't the only one who wanted my share. The front door was open. That was the first thing I noticed. Not wide open, just enough to be wrong. My grandmother stopped walking. So did I. The house that had always felt heavy now felt violated, like it had exhaled something important while we were gone. Stay behind me, she said quietly. I didn't argue. Inside, the air was cooler than it should have been, drawers half open. A chair pulled out from the dining table at an odd angle. Someone had been searching, not randomly, purposefully. My heart pounded as I followed her down the hallway. Every step echoed too loudly. Marcus, I whispered, knowing how stupid that sounded. She shook her head. No, she said, this is sloppier. We reached the study. The desk drawers were open, papers scattered. A file cabinet tipped forward like it had been yanked too hard. My grandmother sighed. They've been waiting longer than he has, she said. Who? I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Voices drifted from the kitchen. Low, urgent. I recognized one immediately. My uncle. The man who taught me how to ride a bike, who once told me blood was thicker than anything. Apparently not thicker than money. My grandmother walked in like she owned the air. Because she did. 3 people froze, my uncle, my aunt, and my cousin holding a folder I recognized, the estate documents, my share. Oh, my aunt said quickly, forcing a smile. You're back already. My grandmother looked at the folder. Put that down. My cousin hesitated. Now, he did. My uncle cleared his throat. We were just organizing things. She stared at him. For who? She asked. Silence answered. You went through my papers, she said calmly. You left the house, my aunt snapped. We didn't know when you'd be back. And that gave you permission? My grandmother asked. My uncle raised his hands. We're family. She nodded slowly. Yes, she said. And that's why this hurts. I stepped forward. What were you looking for? My cousin avoided my eyes. Don't, my grandmother said sharply. Let him speak. My cousin swallowed. The original will. My chest tightened. There it is, my grandmother said. You thought Marcus was lying. My uncle frowned. What are you talking about? She turned to him. About the missing money, she said. About who's been helping him. The room shifted. My aunt laughed nervously. That's ridiculous. Is it? My grandmother asked. Then explain the deposits. She reached into her purse again, more papers, more proof. My uncle's face went gray. You had no right, he whispered. She stepped closer. I had every right, she said. This was my house, my husband, my family. She looked around the room. And now I know exactly who I've been protecting. My cousin's voice cracked. We were just trying to make things fair. I snapped. Fair, I shouted. You tried to take what was left to me after years of silence, after everything. My grandmother placed a hand on my arm. Enough, she said gently. Then she looked at them. This ends today. She laid out the rules. Clear, unmovable, the money stayed where it was. Any interference would trigger consequences. Legal, financial, criminal. You'll walk away, she said, quietly. And if we don't, my aunt challenged. My grandmother smiled. Then I let the truth speak. They left one by one. No shouting, no hugs, just shame trailing behind them like smoke. When the door finally closed, I collapsed onto the couch. My grandmother sat beside me. I thought I was coming home for closure, I said. She nodded. You came home for clarity. I looked at her. How long have you known? She stared at the wall. Long enough to be tired, she said. That night I couldn't sleep. Because clarity brings something else with it. A question. If this was what my family was capable of, what else had they hidden? At 3:17 a.m., I heard the floorboard creak. Not the soft settling of an old house. Not the wind. A step. My eyes snapped open. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, listening to my own heartbeat thud in my ears. The hallway light was off, but a thin blade of moonlight cut across the bedroom door. Another sound. Paper. Being touched. I slipped out of bed and opened the door slowly, inch by inch. The hallway was empty, but the study door at the end was ajar. The same study they'd already torn apart. My stomach dropped. Someone was still here. I moved quietly, every nerve screaming. The closer I got, the more I heard, drawers sliding, files shifting. Desperate now, not angry. Desperation makes noise. I reached the doorway and stopped. My grandmother stood inside the study. Alone, calm. She was sitting at the desk, lamp on, reading a thin notebook. Like this was just another sleepless night. "I thought I told you to rest," she said without looking up. "I heard someone," I whispered. She nodded. "So did I." I scanned the room. "Where are they?" She closed the notebook. "They left," she said. "They didn't find what they wanted." My pulse finally slowed a fraction. "What were they looking for?" I asked. She met my eyes. "The real inheritance." She gestured for me to sit. "I did that money," she said. "That's just leverage." "Then what matters?" I asked. She slid the notebook across the desk. It was old, leather-bound, worn at the edges. "Names," she said. "Dates, decisions." I opened it, my breath caught. Inside were handwritten entries spanning decades. Properties bought, sold, transferred, accounts moved, shell companies, quiet partnerships, my grandfather's handwriting, and my grandmother's notes in the margins. This wasn't just a family estate. It was a map. "They used us," I whispered. "They tried to," she corrected. "Your grandfather refused to let them finish." I looked up. "So why me?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "Because you left." That surprised me. "You escaped their influence," she said. "You built a life without their hooks in you." I swallowed. "And because," she added, "you asked questions." A knock echoed through the house. 3 sharp raps, not loud, confident. My heart jumped. She stood. "Stay here," she said. I didn't listen. 2 men stood on the porch, suits, badges. My grandmother nodded at them. "About time," she said. One of them smiled. "Ma'am." They looked at me. "You must be the beneficiary," one said. The word felt heavier now. They explained quickly, quietly. An investigation had been running for months. Fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. My family wasn't just messy, they were criminal. "And Marcus?" I asked. The agent's smile faded. "He ran," my grandmother sighed. "He always does," she said. "What happens now?" I asked. The agent glanced at her. "That depends on what she decides to release." They left as silently as they came. I turned to her. "You controlled all of this." She shook her head. "I delayed it," she said, "until you were ready." "Ready for what?" She looked at the notebook. "For the choice." The sun began to rise, washing the room in pale light. "You can walk away," she said. "Take the money, let the rest burn." "And the other option?" I asked. She met my eyes. "You finish what we started." My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "He's not done." My stomach twisted. She saw my face. "Marcus?" she asked. I nodded, her jaw set. "Then," she said quietly, "neither are we." The message sat on my screen like a ticking bomb. "He's not done." No name, no explanation, just intent. My grandmother didn't ask to see my phone. She didn't need to. She'd lived long enough to recognize a threat without reading it. "He won't stop," she said. "Men like him never do." I swallowed. "Then why didn't we stop him completely?" She looked at me. "Because sometimes you don't end a snake by cutting the tail." By noon, the house was quiet again. Too quiet. Family had scattered. Investigators would return later. For now, it was just the 2 of us, sitting at the kitchen table like survivors of a storm that hadn't fully passed. She slid a folder toward me. Inside were documents already prepared. Trust transfers, power of attorney, oversight rights. "They were meant for after my funeral," she said. "I changed my mind." My chest tightened. "You're giving this to me?" She nodded. "I'm giving you control." Control. That word had terrified me before. Now it felt like a responsibility I couldn't refuse. "What happens if I say no?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Then someone else says yes." The implication landed hard. The phone rang, a blocked number. My grandmother answered it without pause. "Yes," she said, her expression hardened. "I see." She listened. Long, silent. Then, "No," she hung up. "That was him," she said. "Fishing. What did he want?" "To remind me he exists," she replied. "And to remind you you're vulnerable." I felt cold. By evening, we had a plan, not revenge. Resolution, the notebook, the files. The evidence, we would finish it properly. Cleanly, legally. But Marcus wasn't the kind of man who waited for paperwork. At 9:42 p.m., the power went out, not a flicker. Dead. Darkness swallowed the house. My heart slammed. "Stay calm," she said. I reached for my phone flashlight. No signal. Outside, tires crunched on gravel, slow, deliberate. "He's here," I whispered. She nodded. "I expected that." We heard the door handle test. Once, twice, then a knock. Soft, mocking. "Open up," Marcus called. "Let's talk." I backed away. My grandmother didn't. She stood straight, walked to the door. "Do not open it," I hissed. She raised a hand. "I'm tired of hiding," she said. The knock turned into a pound. "Open the door," he repeated, "or I come in." She leaned close to the door. "You already did," she said calmly. Silence, then a laugh. "You think I'm scared of an old woman?" "No," she said. "I think you're scared of what I've already sent." The pounding stopped. Footsteps shifted. Confusion, then anger. The door burst open. Marcus stood there, wild-eyed. No mask, no calm, just fury. The gun was back in his hand. He raised it instantly, pointed it at me. I froze again. "That money is mine," he snarled. "You don't get to rewrite history." My grandmother stepped between us. He laughed. "Move." She didn't. I said move. She looked up at him. "You already lost," she said. He pressed the gun to her forehead. My scream caught in my throat. "You pull that trigger," she said quietly, "and every secret you've ever buried goes public." His hand shook. "Shut up. I sent everything," she continued. "Banks, police, attorneys, media." I stared at her. She never told me that part. "You're bluffing," he said. She smiled. "Check your phone." His eyes flicked down. His phone buzzed. Once. Twice. Over and over. Notifications lighting his face pale. His grip loosened. Sirens wailed in the distance. Getting closer, he backed away slowly. "You did this," he hissed at me. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Marcus ran. Left the door swinging. Left the gun behind. I collapsed into a chair, shaking. My grandmother locked the door, then finally sat, tired but victorious. "Is it over?" I whispered. She closed her eyes. "Almost," she said, because there was still one truth I hadn't faced yet, and she was about to make me hear it. The sirens passed the house, not toward it, past it. My stomach dropped. "They're not stopping," I said. My grandmother opened her eyes slowly. "They don't need to." That didn't make sense yet, but it would. She stood and went back to the study. I followed, legs weak, mind racing. She opened the old safe behind the bookshelf, the one I didn't know existed. Inside was a single envelope. My name, written in my grandfather's handwriting. My throat tightened. "You were supposed to read this when everything else failed," she said. She handed it to me. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was short. Painfully so. "If you are reading this, it means the family chose greed over blood. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it sooner. I chose you because you were never meant to stay. Use this truth wisely. And forgive yourself for surviving. I couldn't breathe." "What truth?" I whispered. She answered for him. "You were never just a beneficiary," she said. "You were the safeguard." She pulled a flash drive from the envelope. "This," she said, "is why the police drove past." I stared at it. "They already have copies," she continued. "What they're waiting for is you." "For what?" "To decide how loud this becomes." I sat down hard. "You planned all of this," I said. She nodded. "Your grandfather and I did. Even Marcus. Especially Marcus." The realization hit like a blow. This wasn't chaos, it was containment. "Why put me in danger?" I asked, anger cracking through the fear. She didn't flinch. "Because he would never show his hand to anyone else," she said. And because you had the strength to survive it. I shook my head. You don't get to decide that. She looked at me then, really looked. You're right, she said, and that's why the choice is yours now. The front door creaked in the wind. I jumped. She didn't. He's gone, she said, for good. How can you be sure? Because men like him don't run unless they know the hunt has started. She explained then, the long game, how the money was bait, how the threats were expected, how the evidence would only be admissible if he escalated. He had. With a gun, everything was documented, time-stamped, recorded. You risked your life, I said quietly. She nodded. So did you. Silence stretched between us. What happens to the family? I asked. She exhaled. They face what they built. And me, she smiled sadly. You walk free. I looked at the flash drive again. Power sat in something so small. So I just hand this over, she shook her head. You tell the story, I frowned. What story? The truth, she said. From your voice, your name. The weight of it settled in my chest. This wasn't about money or inheritance or revenge. It was about ending a cycle. The sun rose fully now, light spilling through the windows like forgiveness that came too late. I'm scared, I admitted. She squeezed my hand. Good, she said. That means you understand what this costs. A knock sounded, 3 firm raps. Official. This time the sirens were for us. She stood. So, she said, steady as ever, are you ready? I looked at the letter one more time. Then the flash drive. Then her, I am, I said, but I was wrong about one thing. The truth wasn't the final twist, because the people at the door weren't who I expected. The men at the door weren't police. No uniforms, no flashing lights. Just 2 figures in dark coats standing too still, eyes too alert. My grandmother didn't look surprised. She looked annoyed. You're late, she said. One of the men smiled thinly. Traffic. My pulse spiked. Who are they? Accountability, she replied. They stepped inside without being invited. The taller one glanced at the broken door, the overturned chair, the gun on the floor. Looks like escalation, he said calmly. It was inevitable, my grandmother answered. The shorter man looked at me, studied me. So, he said, you're the one who inherited the mess. I didn't ask for this, I said. He nodded. None of us ever do. They introduced themselves with names that sounded real enough to be fake. Private investigators, financial crimes consultants. The kind that don't knock unless things are already far gone. We're here because Marcus broke the agreement, the taller one said. What agreement? I asked. My grandmother answered. The one that kept him alive. They explained quickly. Marcus had been under watch longer than I realized. Not just by police, by creditors, by people he owed, by partners who didn't forgive mistakes. My family's money wasn't just dirty, it was visible. And Marcus had been skimming from people who don't tolerate that. He forced our hand tonight, the shorter man said. Gun changed the rules. My stomach twisted. So what happens now? I asked. They exchanged a look. Now, the taller one said, you disappear from this. What? I said. You walk away, he clarified. Publicly, quietly, you cooperate. You tell your story once, then you vanish. My grandmother crossed her arms. That wasn't the plan. It is now, he replied. I looked at her. What does that mean? She didn't answer immediately. That scared me more than anything else so far. Marcus will run, the shorter man continued. But he won't run far. When he's caught, he'll talk. And if he talks about me, I asked. That's why you disappear, he said. The room felt smaller. You're asking me to give up my life, I said. He shook his head. We're offering you a chance to keep it. My grandmother finally spoke. She doesn't vanish, she said. She finishes this. The taller man sighed. With respect, ma'am, she's already done more than enough. My grandmother leaned forward. You don't know what enough looks like in this family, she said. The shorter man studied her. Then tell her the rest, he said quietly. She closed her eyes, then nodded. There was another reason your grandfather chose you, she said to me. My chest tightened. You said it was because I left. That's part of it, she said, but not all. She stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the morning light. You weren't supposed to exist, she said. The words hit me like ice. What? I whispered. She turned. Your mother was pregnant when she tried to leave, she said. Your grandfather hid her, protected her. I felt dizzy. Marcus found out years later, she continued. He thought you were leverage. Insurance. The investigators stayed silent. This was family business. He wanted you close, she said. Contained, useful. I stared at her. So my whole life was watched, she said. Yes, my throat closed. And the money, I asked. She shook her head. The money was never the prize. The taller man spoke softly. You're the last loose end. Silence swallowed the room. I felt exposed, like every choice I'd ever made was suddenly under review. So if I stay, I said slowly, people get hurt. If you leave, he replied, they stop chasing. I looked at my grandmother. She looked tired, for the first time old. I won't run, I said. Both men stiffened. I didn't survive all this to disappear, I continued. I'll testify, I'll sign whatever you need. And when Marcus names you, the shorter man asked. I'll tell the truth, I said, loudly. My grandmother's eyes filled with something like pride. The taller man exhaled. You're braver than you should be. No, I said, I'm just done being quiet. He nodded slowly. Then we accelerate. They left as quickly as they arrived. The house felt hollow after. I sank into a chair. I didn't know, I whispered, about any of this. My grandmother sat beside me. I know, she said. That was the point. Did you ever think about telling me? She nodded. Every day. Why didn't you? Because knowing too early breaks people, she said. And I needed you unbroken. A notification buzzed on my phone. News alert. Local businessman sought in connection with financial fraud and armed threat. Marcus's face stared back at me, public now, exposed. He's running, I said. She nodded. Not for long. I leaned back, exhausted. What happens to you? I asked. She smiled faintly. I rest, she said. Knowing the truth didn't die with us. I believed her, but I also knew something else. Marcus wouldn't go quietly, and when he was cornered, he would try to take someone with him. 3 days later, my name was everywhere, not splashed across headlines. Whispered. The kind of attention that slithers through comment sections and private messages. Is it true? Were you there? Did he really pull a gun? I didn't answer any of them. Because Marcus hadn't been caught yet, and men like him don't disappear quietly. The house was no longer safe. Not really. Investigators came and went. Statements were recorded. Evidence cataloged. The gun bagged and tagged. My grandmother stayed calm through all of it. Too calm. That's how I knew she was bracing for something worse. On the 4th night, I woke to her sitting at the edge of my bed, fully dressed, coat on, shoes tied. It's time, she said. For what? I asked, heart racing. To end it, she replied. We drove before sunrise. No destination given, just roads unspooling ahead of us like a confession no one wanted to hear. Marcus contacted someone, she said finally. Someone he shouldn't have. My stomach tightened. Who? She glanced at me. Me. He'd left a message, not threatening, pleading. He wanted a meeting, one last deal. He thinks I can still save him, she said. Can you? I asked. She shook her head. No, but I can make sure he doesn't hurt anyone else. We stopped at an old roadside diner. Closed, windows boarded, parking lot cracked and empty. My pulse pounded. This feels like a trap, I said. She smiled faintly. All endings do. Marcus arrived late. Haggard, unshaven, eyes darting, no gun this time. That worried me more. You look well, he said bitterly. My grandmother didn't return the greeting. Where is it? He asked. Where's what? She replied. You know what? He snapped. The rest of the files, the ones you didn't send. She studied him. You still think this is a negotiation? He looked at me then, really looked. You, he said quietly. You were never supposed to be this strong. I met his gaze. You were never supposed to point a gun at me, I said. Something flickered in his eyes, regret. Maybe, or calculation. He dropped to his knees. The sound was sickening. Please, he said. I can fix this. My grandmother's expression didn't change. This is fixing it, she said. She reached into her bag. I tensed. She pulled out her phone. She pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the empty diner. Clear, confident, detailed. A confession, everything. He staggered back like he'd been hit. You recorded me, he whispered. Years ago, she said. You ruined me, he said, voice breaking. She shook her head. No, she said. I stopped you. Sirens sounded in the distance. Real this time. Marcus looked around wildly. You promised, he said to her. I promised your mother, she replied. Not you. That stopped him cold. Police cars rolled in. Doors opened. Commands shouted. Marcus didn't run. He just stared at me as they cuffed him. Tell them, he said quietly. Tell them everything. I nodded. I will. As they drove him away, I felt nothing. No relief, no triumph, just an emptiness where fear used to live. Back in the car, my grandmother exhaled deeply. It's done, she said. I watched the road blur past. Is it? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, for him, yes. And for us, she smiled softly. For us, she said, it's just beginning. When we got home, a single letter waited on the porch. No stamp, no address, just my name. Inside was a newspaper clipping, a photograph of my mother standing beside my grandfather, smiling. I'd never seen that picture before. On the back, in unfamiliar handwriting, were 4 words, you were protected, always. My chest tightened. I looked at my grandmother. She nodded. One last truth, she said. Your mother knew how this would end. I swallowed. And she chose it anyway. I folded the clipping carefully. The past finally felt complete, but closure has a price, and mine was about to be paid in public. The next morning, the news broke. Not online whispers, not rumors, headlines everywhere. Local businessman arrested in connection with armed threat and financial fraud, pictures of Marcus. Grainy, desperate, cornered. My name wasn't printed, but the world knew. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. My grandmother slid into the chair opposite me. You're going to tell it, she said. Exactly as it happened. I don't know if I can, I whispered. You can, she said, because it's true, and truth doesn't need courage, it needs clarity. We spent the day preparing. Statements, photos, documentation, timeline, everything clean, precise, undeniable. The story was ours, mine, hers. My grandfather's, no embellishment, no revenge, only facts, only truth. By evening, we had compiled everything. The flash drive, the letter, the notebook, photographs, everything Marcus had tried to hide. This, my grandmother said, is armor. Use it wisely. I published my story the next morning, not sensationalized, not exaggerated, just the facts. I watched as views climbed. Comments poured in, messages of support, shock, awe. People wanted to know how I survived, how my grandmother survived, how Marcus didn't get away with it. The police closed the investigation swiftly. Marcus faced charges he couldn't escape. The financial institutions returned the stolen money. Accounts were frozen. Properties reassigned. Justice, meticulous and cold, finally unfolded. Even then, the relief was partial, because the truth had a ripple effect. Family members had to face exposure. Secrets they'd buried for decades were now under light. Some relationships ended. Some were repaired. But the damage done by greed and betrayal was undeniable. My grandmother remained calm through it all. She watched quietly as I signed papers, gave statements, and oversaw the distribution of assets. At night, she'd sit in her chair, reading, knitting, or just watching me. You did well, she said once. I looked at her. We did well, she smiled faintly. Yes, but remember, in our family, well is relative. Months later, life settled into a fragile normalcy. I could go to work. I could meet friends. I could breathe. But the lessons remained. Never trust greed disguised as loyalty. Always expect the unexpected. And never underestimate those who have been waiting silently. One evening, we sat on the porch, sipping tea. I finally asked the question I'd been holding back. Grandma, why did you stay? Why risk yourself for me? She looked at me, her eyes sharp, alive. Because you were worth it, she said. Because someone had to stand when everyone else cowered. I realized then that survival wasn't enough. Victory wasn't enough. What mattered was who you had standing beside you when it all fell apart. And in that moment, I understood exactly why my grandmother had chosen to fight. Because some battles are bigger than money, bigger than threats, bigger than fear. They're about family, about legacy, about truth. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard. For the first time in years, I felt free. But more than freedom, I felt alive, because I had faced the darkness. And someone, my grandmother, had refused to let it win. Weeks passed. Marcus was behind bars, his network dismantled. The world had moved on, but I hadn't. Some part of me stayed alert, waiting for another shadow to rise, because stories like this don't end neatly. They leave fingerprints. The house felt lighter now. No more threats. No more lurking eyes, just walls that had seen betrayal, courage, and survival, and a grandmother who had taught me more than I could have imagined. I began to organize my life differently. I took control of the inheritance. Not recklessly, not for revenge. I invested carefully, helped charities, secured accounts, made sure Marcus or anyone like him could never touch it again. People asked about the story. "How did you survive?" they'd ask. "Who stood with you?" I always said the same thing. Some battles you fight alone. Others you fight with the right person at your side. Everyone assumed I meant friends, colleagues, or even my parents. But they were wrong. It was her. My grandmother. The woman who had seen everything, waited patiently, and acted decisively at the exact right moment. The woman who had stared down a gun for me and refused to blink. Months later, I found myself sitting in the same kitchen where it all began. The morning sun streamed through the blinds. I looked at the empty chair beside me and smiled softly. Her presence lingered even in silence, even in calm. I opened the flash drive one last time. I had a choice: destroy it, keep it, release it. I realized then what my grandfather had meant when he said I was the safeguard. The power wasn't in revenge, it wasn't in money, it was in choice. I made the choice to preserve the truth, to honor the courage that had protected me, to ensure that Marcus's threats could never threaten again. And in that choice I found peace. I called her then. "Thank you," I whispered. Her voice, calm and steady, replied, "You don't need to thank me, you needed to believe in yourself. And now you do." I smiled, because I did. And as the sun climbed higher, bathing the kitchen in warm light, I finally understood. The true inheritance wasn't the money. It was the legacy of courage, of standing firm when fear demanded surrender, of family protecting family, and of a grandmother who refused to let evil win. Some lessons cost everything. Some moments define a lifetime, and some people are worth standing beside, even when the world seems ready to collapse. I closed the notebook. The past was settled. The present was mine. And the future, well, that was finally in my hands. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to the Priceless Voices channel. Hit that like button to support our work, and don't forget to smash the hype button so this story can reach even more people who might need to hear it. Remember, stay strong, stay vigilant, and never underestimate the power of truth. I'll see you in the next one.